Hi, everybody. It sounds like a plane is taking off, which sounds super cool. But I'm also really cold, so if it gets a little warmer in here, that'd be super cool. All right, well, the end of the talk, we're almost done with our conference. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about progress versus motion and economics, which fits really well at a security conference. Anyway, so hello, clicker. Come on. Come on. I love it. Murphy loves me. Never works. There are three things that people usually realize when they meet me. The first one is that I'm a girl. And unfortunately, in security, that's still pretty rare. The next one is that unless I'm talking about security and what I do, I'm actually really introverted and shy. I do a lot of speaking at conferences. I run a security user group. I'm super active on forums. It's all about security, but if it's anything else, I don't talk a lot. And the third one is that I'm actually really, really passionate, and I love what I do. I very, very famously love what I do. I will pick up people's dry cleaning if it means they're more involved in security. I will go the extra mile, and I'm really driven about it. I love what I do. And that's something that's really evident with me, and it's something that I'm always thought was a real gift. I'm lucky that I get to love with something that I work with and that I'm passionate about. And I always thought that that was something that was really good. But this year has really sucked for me on both a professional and a personal level. And it all kind of started with some really, really good/bad feedback that I got from a leader that I had. And I'm one of those people that really like feedback. I like hearing what I'm doing well and what I'm doing bad. So I always show up with please answer these 15 questions. And I'm really pedantic, so they're always really specified. And he was the kind of leader that he didn't actually do anything I asked or read my emails or care about what I needed. But he really figured out that since I'd asked for feedback 5 times, I really, really wanted it. And so he said to me, well, you're obviously really good at your job. You've done a brilliant job building security into our platform, and no one can question that you're good at this, but. And at this point, I had out my pen, and I was like, yes, I'm going to grow, I'm going to get better. And he's like, it's really obvious that you care about what you do when you're really passionate about it. And that was his criticism, that I was really passionate about what I did. And he's like, people see that you take a personal interest in this. And I was like, all right, okay. I enjoy feedback, so I was like, so what do you think I could do better? And his real feedback to me, his female subordinate, was, well, if I could not talk at meetings, I could follow up with people after the meeting quietly by themselves. That was his feedback. And I was like, all right, whatever. And so I just kind of left, and the next day I wrote him an email to be like, I heard your feedback, I'm not going to do that. If that's going to be a problem, let me know. But he didn't respond to emails, so I basically ignored him and did what I'd been doing the entire time anyway. And I left that job, and I did something that I've never done in my entire life. I took 2 months off. And I kind of thought about his feedback, and I thought about the job that I had, which I loved, but the culture had completely fallen apart, and I was trying to figure out why that was. And I've been doing security, and I've been working within the security field for a lot of years now, and I've always kind of had the idea that if people can get involved in the security process and they can feel like they're committed and they feel like they're involved and feel like we're not out to get them, that will start the journey. That will have what do you say? Squared the circle or circled the square, or there's a shape involved somewhere. And clearly, given his feedback and the cultural collapse of my previous job, I'd missed something, and I hadn't really understood what it was. Because what my criticism of the security community had been previously is that we'd only been looking at pen tests. We'd only been looking at a reactive response. We were only attacking systems, we weren't trying to build them, and nothing was getting better. And so then I was looking at what I was doing. My developers and I were like this. We were super integrated with one another. And as I thought more about his feedback, I realized that what he was actually saying was that the balance of my passion versus the passion of other leaders in my same kind of rank or at my same level, it wasn't balanced. So he had a point. He just stated it with his foot so shoved so far in his mouth that I'm surprised he could, talk past the choking. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, so if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, and pen testing wasn't solving the problem, but what I had done, we had DevOps, we had SecDevOps, we were doing all of the right things, but people still weren't happy. I clearly had missed something, and I hate when I miss things, because if I miss things, I can't grow. And so I had 2 months off, and so I bought every leadership, every communication, every CEO reading list book I could find. And I basically just sat and read for 2 months, and I painted my house. It was very weird. And one of the people that I ran into, but I read his book, was Joseph Campbell, and he was talking about heroes and the hero myth. And Joseph Campbell's written a book called, I think it's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, about the hero arc and how the hero storyline goes through history and all of the different types of myths that have existed. And if we look at how movies are today, that same kind of arc is through all of those different types of stories. And that's also kind of the story that we're telling ourselves. And so this is the arc that Joseph Campbell has kind of written up. And if we look at how we tell stories and what we say to ourselves, is we always start with a call to adventure. And this is true for my own journey in security. I kind of fell into security by mistake. My friends are developers, I like puzzles, I like breaking things. And I hadn't realized that was actually a job until I met a pen tester who was like, this is a thing you can get money for. And I was like, I like money. And so it was a complete mistake. And I think this is true for a lot of people that get into security. If they're, older, now there's a lot of Hollywood movies that, says it's super cool, but it's something that you're inspired to do. You're curious, you like breaking things, you like creation, you're a creative person, and so you have this call to adventure to get involved. And we all see ourselves as kind of, the hero of our own story. And what's cool about security is that we all feel like we can make a difference, and that's something that I truly appreciate. And as we journey off into our own heroic adventure, we start with, we're going to make things better. And making things better is kind of different depending on who you are as a person within security. For an offensive pen tester, it might be, I'm going to find a really, really dangerous bug so that someone knows about it and so they can fix it. If they're like me, it's building more security into a pipeline so that other people can work faster. If you're working from a space of compliance, it's making the organization comply so that they are more secure, so that they're more, they're easier to regulate, so audits or those types of things go faster. But everybody has their own type of call to adventure, and everybody has kind of their own definition of hero. And within the security space, we're kind of an MMO. We all need to work together because we can't take down the big monster all alone. But that is where, generally speaking, we all start. We all pull the Leroy Jenkins when we're new, myself included. We're all bravely charging forward to get the chicken, and we're going to get wiped out. And this is true for nearly everybody within security. We all start out with, I can do this, I can make a difference, and then we run smack into a wall. And the wall can be, we're not finding the latest zero-day exploit. The wall can be cultural. The wall can be technical. The wall can be governmental or regulatory. But everybody runs into that wall the first time, and because we're resilient people and because we're stubborn, we all kind of tell ourselves we're going to get past it. And so the first villains of our stories are generally easy to understand. And they come with phrases like, yes, I could do that, but, or, yeah, but why can't we just? And so we're trying to give people security advice to, slay the demon so that we can get on in our journey together. But we're running into things like, yeah, but you have to understand that I. And those things are really, really difficult. Because we, from a security perspective, we're on our journey. We're the hero of the story. We are saving the developers or whoever it happens to be from the security demon that we can all see. And rather than being, our cheerleaders, rather than joining us in that success, they're meeting us, but yes, but, and they're not listening. And as we're looking around in Twitter, it's just getting worse. There's bug after bug after bug, and the constant drumbeat of nobody cares. And so there we are all alone on our hero's journey. And at some point, we get to the point where it's all too much. And this is where we can see that burnout within the security field is a bigger problem than it was. It's growing exponentially worse. But that doesn't mean the problems are less. The problems, I would argue, are more. We're finding security bugs faster. The security problems are getting worse. But are we actually doing anything differently? And then we can say that, well, we're doing DevOps and we have SecDevOps and there are all sorts of buzzwords and we have tools and we're trying to get involved, but are those actually things that are making a difference? And this is kind of where I was in my 2-month hermit, like painting my house and reading the books, because I genuinely thought it was. And yet my boss, despite the feedback that was poorly stated, had a point. But I couldn't really control the fact that the other leaders weren't as driven as I am, because I'm unusual in that way. So what could I have reasonably done differently? Because the result was that I was really, really depressed. I was hurt and I was frustrated because I genuinely thought that by being passionate, that would solve a problem. And it did. It solved some of them, but not all of them, and not in the ways that I had been expecting. And what was even worse is that after I left this job, I was kind of met with this failure is, a part of your journey, and get up and dust yourself off, and, we're fail fast and all this crap. And the thing is, failure sucks. And we're kind of getting into this gilded age of failure is okay, But that kind of glosses over how hurt and how betrayed I felt. Because I'd worked for this company for years, and when I left, I didn't feel like I was being appreciated. And that was really, really hard for me. And rather than be able to talk about that, I was like, dust yourself off, you're learning from your journey, and that's not what I wanted to hear. Because from a security perspective, this is what we're met with on a daily basis. It is an onslaught and a complete barrage of the latest security things, where we're also reading articles. 9 out of 10 security jobs are, unfulfilled. Security problems are getting worse. Huge, huge fines. And then we work at places where we are expected to be responsible for securing an entire company, where we're also in a space of people don't care about what we do, people hate us, we're always the enemy in a lot of people's stories. And that is a really, really difficult bridge to gap, because we're also, generally speaking, chronically understaffed. And so from a front-end developer's perspective, yeah, failure sucks, but they don't wake up every morning to 18 emails of the latest security horror story. I do. And so that sense of responsibility versus my failure is something that was really, really difficult for me to carry. And a part of the problem is that I think that a lot of people in security are really passionate. We care deeply about what we do, which means that it's hard to shake off a failure, and it's hard to shake off a sense of responsibility, especially if you work with sensitive data, or especially if you are the person leading a team, or you are the first person, or you are the responsible person. Because if you're the responsible person and everybody on your team is expecting you to lead a security effort, your failure will affect everybody else. And it is not a failure that you can just brush off, where the culture right now is fail fast. Yeah, no one says that about security. No one ever. No one's like, oh, a security issue, that's going to be fine, we'll dust ourselves off. That sounds really good from a PR perspective, but culturally speaking, most organizations, that is true for developers, that is not true for security people. If you're working in an organization where it is, you're lucky. I didn't, and it sucked. Which means that this is kind of how I spent my summer, in a weird little, sad, alone, I'm reading all the books like I'm a CEO. So now my ads are all over the place. They think I'm a white 40-year-old man, which is kind of awkward for me. But what was interesting as I kept reading was I got into the space of economics. And I started reading a lot about economics and marketing and sales. I really dug into the whole CEO and sales tract. And what I started to realize was that when people were saying no to me, no, we can't do that, no, we can't fix that, no, we can't do this, what they weren't actually saying was no for the rest of time. What they were saying was no right now, maybe later. And we see this a lot in sales, because the reason that people have all these marketing campaigns and all these, buy two, get one free, going out of sale soon, hurry, 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 is because there are two fundamental concepts that exist from a sales and a marketing perspective that is the truth for how we think and how we work as people. We are intrinsically drawn to things if we believe that one of two things are true. There's either a limited time or there is limited quality. People will be more interested in taking that thing. If there's only one left, I will want that one thing. If there's less of it, I want it. Look at diamonds. Diamonds are held artificially rare. There's lots of them. But they're super expensive because they're rare. They're not. I have them. I think they're cool. I am a case study. Works on me. And in security, it is a rare resource. But time, we are going to be hacked, every 15 minutes. So it's happening now. And so security has done the exact same thing as every other sales and marketing thing, is they've made this some sort of emergency. And in economics, there are two particular schools when it looks at how you do these types of things. So there's the reactant theory. And the reactant theory says that if you are going to push somebody, they're going to push back even harder. So you can see this a lot. I come from the States. I live in Sweden, but I originally come from the States. And every single time gun control comes up, bullets and guns fly off the shelves. Because people that like guns or have guns are afraid that, they're coming to take our guns, therefore I'm going to buy more guns regardless if I need more guns or not. And in security, classically, there's been a lockdown approach. We're taking away people's rights, where they've done a lot of studies saying that people make more security mistakes the more locked down the environment is. It's more likely that you will make more security mistakes if the environment is more locked down, which is kind of backwards. And then there's the commodities theory. And the commodities theory is where diamonds come from. It's because it's a rare thing. It's unusual, which means that I want it. I may not need it, but I want it. And so in economics, these are the two things, and both of them are built on the idea of scarcity. Neither one actually says the resource is scarce. But they are both built on the idea of we want people to purchase more of our things. And so in security, we have the emergency. And if we work at a company where we're trying to drive more security into the platform, from our perspective, we wake up with 18 emails in our mailbox every single day. It is an emergency. Security is getting worse. There are more security bugs. The fines are higher. The expectations are more prevalent. More people care, which means that the spotlight is ever more presently on us. So from our perspective, it is an emergency. We need more buy-in. We need developers to get involved. How can we possibly bridge this gap? Because the emergency is here. And it has created what could be one of the most toxic environments to work in, because burnout is increasing. And the high stress of working within this field is staggering. And if you talk to most security people, they are overworked, understaffed, and in a complete panic for when the bad thing happens. It is a difficult environment to work within. It is not getting easier. Because within the security field, we also have this odd idea of a binary choice. There are the good security choices, and then there are the bad security choices. And we, from a security perspective, always seem to know what they are. The developers should always be doing this. The question isn't, do they have the ability to do it? The security answer is, they should always, or they should never. And I've never really understood how we could arrive at that, but I find myself doing it as well. I judge people based on their actions, based on what they do. But in my kind of crusade of make sure the security is approachable, I want them to judge me based on my intent. But I judge other people based on their actions, where actions, from my perspective at the time, were a binary thing. They were good and they were bad. I wanted people to make the good choices. I was going to help them to make the good choices. And I would buy right into the reactant theory. I would push and they would push back harder. And so then I'd show up with muffins, and it was kind of a long crusade. But I had my 2 months, and I was reading more about the human brain, and I got into the psychology of scarcity theory. Because we've all heard kind of, you're so negative, security is so negative. Be more glass half full. And there was an interesting experiment that was done in the States looking at the idea of the glass half full. And so they'd taken the participants in the study and they divided them into two groups. And there was the positive group and there was the negative group. And the positive group was presented with two ideas where it was a 70% success rate and there was, I think it was an 80% more likely that they would get more money. And the negative group was a 30% failure rate and 50% likelihood that they would lose money. And those were kind of their defaults. And so the positive group was presented with the exact same statistic. All right, do you like thing A where it's 70% positive, or do you like thing B more where it's 30% more negative? They would always pick the one where it was the positive statistics presented. The negative group was presented with negative statistics, where they would pick the negative. I want the one that's less likely. And so they're like, okay, this is understandable, but how difficult is it for people to switch? And what they discovered was that the positive group, looking at two exactly same problems, if they're going to go from I want the positive to how much can I see that 30% negative, which is what they initially disliked, it's the exact same thing. 70% positive, 30% negative, it's the same thing. The statistics are exactly the same. And it took that group about 7 seconds to figure that out, plus minus. The negative group with the exact same problem set, it took them 11 seconds. The human brain is actually hardwired for a more negative response. It is far more difficult to go from a negative mindset to a positive than from a positive mindset to a negative. The problem being that once you arrive in the negative mindset from the positive, you can get stuck. Which leads back to the idea of the scarcity idea. And scarcity has been researched by economists for a while, where we, from the security field, we've been operating under the idea of the security poverty line. And a lot of companies are actually working, and a lot of people are actually working well below the security poverty line. And if we're looking at scarcity theory from poverty, poverty isn't described only in a monetary perspective. Poverty is described as the gap between what your needs are and your ability to get them. And what's interesting is that if you are working from a poverty mindset, or if you find yourself in poverty, your ability to make cognitive choices are significantly hampered. You make far worse choices the poorer you are. And they've realized that this probably comes down to 3 different things. The first one is that when you are poor, and I have been poor, I have been very, very poor, so everything I bought, the first thing I thought about was everything I couldn't buy. My entire day was full of only the trade-offs that I was making, constantly. Whereas now, I don't have those types of concerns as long as I don't make wild and crazy expenditures. I took a cab to get here. I know roughly what it costs, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my day thinking about that. Previously, I would have. And when you are poor, or when you're operating from a poverty, you become hyper-focused on what that is. And poverty isn't necessarily an economic thing. If you're focused on time, if you're time poor, you can't spend time with your kids, you can't spend time with your family, you can't spend time with your partner, you will be hyper-aware of the 5 minutes that you have. If you don't have enough resources, or if you wake up to 18 mails of all the security problems, you will be hyper-focused on that. Which means that you will also be more likely to give in to temptation. We judge people, everybody, on the choices that people in poverty make. Oh, they shouldn't have those rims on the car. How can they possibly afford that phone? How can they possibly? Because from our perspective, if we are not poor at the time, they're making poor choices. Those choices aren't, long-term goals. How could they? How could we? But security works from a poverty mindset. And so the choices that we are making from a security perspective, a lot of the time they are not in line with what the business needs, what the company needs, or what the culture actually needs from a long-term perspective. They are things that we are giving to ourselves to make ourselves feel better, where we do not have the cognitive ability, due to our poverty mindset, to think long term. And it sucks. And the worst part is, we do this to users too. I am sick to death of hearing it is the user's fault, because there's also our security knowledge poverty line, where we are blaming people for knowledge that they do not have. And we're saying, how could they possibly? And we say this a lot in revenge porn. I, earlier this week, had to sit and listen to a friend cry for 45 minutes because her ex-partner was threatening her with her own photos. And she was crying so hard that she was throwing up. And her biggest fear was, she works within security, she was going to be blamed by her own colleagues if they ever found out. She was crying so hard she was throwing up. And she has all of the knowledge that I do. She's way better at this than I am. And even within myself, I was just like, well, she should have, and I was just like, no, stop it. Because we blame other people. We do. From our place of non-poverty, from our place of privilege. Because we didn't give in to whatever temptation that we're currently judging somebody else from. And so here we are on our journey together. We are at our absolute lowest, because the poverty line does not seem like the place that a keynote should be. This is not an inspiring keynote. You're like, crap, this is really depressing. It's been a great conference, and now she's just bringing the house down to the depressing spot. So there we are at the very, very bottom. And this is, I think, where a lot of security is currently. Because we have these great tools, we have these great ideas of DevOps, and what I really like about this conference, and a lot of the work that's being done here, is trying to bring developers and security closer together. Make sure that our discipline is what it's supposed to be, one of empowerment. However, we are not solving the challenges together, because I honestly think we're all working from the idea of a poverty mindset. There are too few of us, our challenges are too great, and we are struggling. We are trying desperately to solve problems that are a lot of the times outside of our own control, and that is not our fault. So now we're going to the world that we're going up, so don't worry. There's a positive message, I promise. So in The Theft of Spirit, the author talks about what we can do. How can we change that cycle? And he wasn't talking about spaghetti specific, but he was talking about this idea of getting lost in a negative mindset and how damaging that can be from a psychological perspective. And he was talking about burnout. And he said that if that is all you see, we take our fears and we blow them up, and the only thing that we will ever see is our darkness. And he said that in that environment, the true visionaries are the people that can describe the light. It may be the blackest night possible. It may be exactly as bad as those 18 emails in our inbox say it is. But the visionary that will lead us out of that is not the person that's focusing on the 18 emails. It is the person that is describing the light to people that may never have seen it. That is the gift of making a change. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because I had always seen my place as I am going to describe the problem to somebody else, because that's how I understood it. That is what I saw. And I'd previously seen my passion and my ability to make myself approachable, but I was making myself approachable, but I was only talking about the dark parts, that it was really bad and I needed help and that we were going to expand. And while all of those things may have been well done, I didn't actually explain where we were going, which was kind of an odd mistake now that I'm, past the point of whoopsie-doopsie and I'm standing here. And so I'd realized that, well, I needed to look at how had other disciplines done this. And so I looked to how development had done this, because development has gone kind of through the same type of change, where we have lead developers and we have architects now, where previously it might have been the most technically gifted person that was like in charge. That's kind of how they used to be doing it. And now we're looking at the idea of leadership instead, where it is not the person that is always be coding or the one that's built the entire database. That may not be the best person leading. The best person leading may be the person that is enabling other things, rather than the person that has the most knowledge about the technical reality of whatever it is. And so I tried to look at how has this actually changed and how are we doing this within security, which led me back to what is actually leadership. And leadership is one of those awful buzzwords that you get dragged to a training and it's some consultant standing and there's PowerPoint slides and then I fall asleep. Because we don't actually define what it is. Because from a security perspective, a lot of the time we are describing the darkness. And we can't lead anybody out of the darkness if we don't know where we're going. And developers have the same problem. Before there were monoliths and now everyone's going microservice-ish or serverless-ish, or they have a very clear understanding of the problems they want to solve. I want my database to be faster because I give a shit about performance. I really want to do this because I want to have the best UX. I want to have the most beautiful front end. They have a really clear understanding of where they want to go. In security, we have a really clear understanding of the problem. We have no idea where we're going in that explanation. We don't, here's security bug X. It exists. This architecture probably exists. I stole it from the internet, but a lot of the architecture hasn't actually improved, but the understanding of the benefits of change have. The understanding of what a leader does has changed. The architecture hasn't necessarily gotten a lot better. But what they have been able to do is they've been able to identify what is bad leadership. And bad leadership is taking the idea of always be coding, make sure that you are absolutely valuable, make sure that you're always involved, everything goes through you, make sure that you're blocking it for your team, make sure that you are the person on the ball. And I see this a lot when I talk to other people that are working in technical security because they are the ones building all of the automations, they're the ones building the pipelines, that was me. Because we are the ones that are keeping the company safe. We have to block the builds. We have to. And development had this problem, and they've grown past it, and I'm saying that we have to too. Because what we are trying to do is we're trying to manage security. And in management, there are 3 things that you can actually manage. And the first is money, the second is time, the third is quality. And only one can be your focus. If it is time, then, well, it will be more expensive and the quality will suffer. If it is quality, then it will take longer time and it will be more expensive. But you can only have one in focus. And what's important to note is that people are nowhere on this slide. People get management and leadership confused, and they are 2 completely different things, because leadership has to do with people. Where you can look at slides like this one instead. Where what is the job of leadership instead? It is to lead a change. And it is to wear very many different types of hats to lead an effective change. But more than anything else, it is to paint the future in a way that everybody else can understand. It is not to focus on the problems. It is not to focus on the darkness. It is not to focus on the here and the now. It is to say that we are going that way. And this is how we're going to get there. And where that way has to be super defined. And that way cannot be our architecture sucks and we suck and everything is bad and we can't do this. And I am not saying that's what security has been doing. I'm saying that's what development did. But if we look at what we're doing from security, how are we actually rising to meet this challenge if we're only talking about the darkness? And I would say that conferences like this one, the idea of SecDevOps, the idea of development empowerment, means that we're starting to kind of come out from the, I'm going to go with like Cthulhu-like arms at the bottom, to get into a future together. But where we're failing is to define what good means. I teach a class on IT security. There's like a 2-year apprentice programship in Sweden, and I teach the IT security module. And on the first day of my class, I asked, what is secure behavior? And none of my students could answer the question. And I'm one of those awful teachers that doesn't give like good, like clear answers to anything. I'm always like, yeah, it depends. And the thing is, it's a really difficult question. What does good enough look like? What does good security look like? And far too often, the people that are making demands can't actually answer the question. They can just say that this problem right here is bad. What would be good? Then they say that problem, but this way instead. That is a one moment. It is not a destination. What is the destination instead is the change that we are starting to see. The security has left kind of the pen testing focus of previous, and we're trying to make ourselves an enabling momentum. Our job, from a security perspective, is to keep other people's jobs safe. We want to make sure that we are building safe things. We are finding the bugs and handling them in safe ways. We are the guardrails that make other people's dreams possible. And the way that we can do that in the best way is making ourselves a part of the conversation, not the villain in somebody else's story. But in order to be a part of that conversation, we have to understand both our place within it and where we are going together. And that isn't necessarily an easy thing to do, because what is secure behavior? Honestly, the answer is it depends. There is no easy answer, there is no compliance, there is no rule set. It depends. If everything was in clear text yesterday, having slightly more encryption tomorrow is better. But is that actually progress? And that's where I kind of got stuck. And the person that got me unstuck is a person on my team called Lila. That's Lila right there. And Lila has worked with me for a little over a year now, and she's brand new to security from a technical perspective. She comes from physical security. And she is one of those people that's also absurdly driven. And so I would give her an assignment, and she'd be off like a rocket, and she'd come back, and she would just have so much information. There was just long reports and so much information. And I'd be looking at it, and I was like, okay, but have we actually solved the thing? And she'd be like, yes, here's all of the stuff. And I'd be like, but you haven't solved the problem. And I would say, well, you missed this, go do it again. And so she, being dedicated, off she'd go, and she'd come back with a huge amount of information again. And I'd go through it again, and back and forth we would go. And I finally got really frustrated with her, and I was like, how can you be missing the point? And she's like, well, I make a list of everything I'm supposed to do, and then, because I am good at my job, and I want to make sure that you know that I'm good at my job so you can give me more money, I check things off my list to make sure that I'm staying on track. And I was like, okay, so how do you know that you're going forward? And she's like, well, I've checked things off my list, and I got the list from you. I'm like, damn it, I did give her the list. Sorry, no swearing. But where her idea was, I am checking things off my list. And I was like, checklists. I hate checklists. Why do I hate checklists? And I hate checklists because they give the idea of checking things off as doing something, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It's my common complaint with compliance-driven security as well. We're a checkbox, and every time I hear that, I'm just like, I hate you. But this is a lot of what we are giving developers and giving other people because we're bad at painting where we're going. Because honestly, I think a lot of the times we don't know, and it is fine to say we don't know where we're going. Developers say this to me all of the time. So we need to give them something, and checklists are fine if we understand their purpose. And it was in my conversations with Lila that I realized that I'd been doing something that I hadn't even realized. And the reason she was failing was that I wasn't telling her what I wanted. I kept hammering on her, like, are we actually solving the problem? Where I hadn't actually told her where we were going. I told her what the problem is, but nobody learns that way. Nobody learns from, here are the top 10 things you shouldn't do. That's not how we teach programming, it's not how we teach anything, but that's what I was doing to her, and it wasn't until she really, really was just like, come on, help me, that I really had to take a look at myself and be like, well, I am failing this person that sits next to me. And we make a lot of fun of security fails, and on Twitter we make a lot of fun of other companies that fail, but do we actually know what good would have been? Because the choices that people make are usually rational from their perspective and based on what's important to them, where I don't genuinely think anybody goes to work and wants to do a bad security job. And so if the specification is build a super high gate, this is what you're going to wind up with. Who is at fault? And it's really easy to make fun of this picture. And it's really easy to make fun of the developers if they're the ones that built the gate. But did we give them a love of fences and containment? Did they become involved in that process? Did they understand why the gate was necessary? No, they didn't. which means the gate isn't actually serving any purpose whatsoever, but it's there because they genuinely want to do a good job. And because we work from a poverty mindset, we're going to blame the people that built this gate, which means our problems are going to get worse. But this brings me to my uplifting message. Because what I hadn't actually realized that is one of the truth strengths of coming from a security perspective is that we work backwards. I work backwards. Lila on my team doesn't. But security people, and I come from a technical background, so most people that come from a technical background in security work backwards. I figure out where I want to go. I want to break into that server. I want to get this bug. I want to exploit that thing. That is my goal. Why do I want to do it? Money, fame, stickers, whatever the case may be. If it's stickers, I'm on board. And based on that, I figure out what I need to do. I need to get that session. I need to do this. I need to do that. And that is what I put my attention on. The thing I care about least is generally how. Because Google exists, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel because I'm generally pretty lazy. But this is backwards from the way most people work. Most people work with a checklist mentality. They establish a goal, and then they create a checklist of this is how I'm going to get there. But the problem with the checklist is that it makes the people around it both responsible for the outcome and owners of the time frame. So while it is motion, it is in fact not progress, because it makes everybody around the person holding the checklist responsible for both of the more important outcomes. Keeping a mindset of focusing on the goal and working backwards means that no matter if the other people around are responsible for, say, time frames, I myself am responsible for the outcome because I understand where I want to be going, which means that I can either remove the obstacles in my path or I can go around them. But people around me are not the people that are responsible for the success. And it was a fundamental change in my thinking because I had always assumed, incorrectly as it turns out, that being passionate and getting other people involved was the solution. What I had missed was if they don't know where we're going, we're not going to actually get anywhere. We can have all of the unit tests, all of the security built into the platform we want, but if we're not actually solving any of the problems, what have we actually been doing besides pulling an awesome duck move? Calm on the top, frantic paddling below. And so what I wanted to leave you with, besides a hopeful interest in economics, which I frankly thought I would never have, is that while this problem is insurmountable, security will never be solved. We are doing ourselves a huge disservice if we are focusing only on the dark parts. There is a darkness, and it will get darker, but we have the ability to get out of that because we understand where we need to be going. Security people understand both the problems and, generally speaking, what has to happen to find a solution. But we have to be able to explain where we need to be going. We have to use the skills that we've developed in getting developers involved to make them a part of that journey forward with us. And we can be the people that are pointing and painting that future for them. But that has to be a painting of hope, because people that only see darkness, that is all they will find. And that is easy to do. And it is understandable if we're looking at how resource poor we generally are. And so that while that is not our fault, we can make adjustments based on that knowledge. So I always try to end on a positive note, to say that the hero's journey exists in all types of stories. And where I personally am, I'm like at the change part, right before I get to the atonement. I'm not exactly sure what atonement is going to be, probably apologizing to someone. But what's nice about it is that I haven't been going here on my own. And I've always had the enormous privilege to be surrounded by people that have helped me, and who have taught me, and who have forgiven me when I've made mistakes. And I think that's where the security community really, really excels, because we've always been very open, and we've always been willing to help one another, and we've always been able to lift one another up when we fall. And that is something that has given me a great sense of comfort. And what I'm hoping is that we can be better at helping one another to define a light future together, because we all see the darkness. We do. It's inescapable. It's right there. But what we need to be doing is leading one another out of it. And that is something that I truly believe we can do together. And so on that more positive note, I thank you all very much. I don't know if there are like questions, seeing as there's like no code in these slides.
We can do questions.
Oh.
Any questions? Yeah, any questions?
I'm going to guess no.
Any comments? Any jokes?
All right.
It's late on day 2.
Yeah, it's been a long day. Well, thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's give it up to Siren again, please.